Considerable wealth can be lost in a moment of time. And this truth was brought very powerfully to us all in the sinking of the Bayesian yacht, which involved the sudden death of millionaire Mike Lynch in that recent and sad example of a life brought to an end so quickly. He had sold his company in 2011 for £8.6 billion. He lived on a large estate. He wanted for nothing. Whatever he desired, he had. But the investigation into the sinking of his yacht has concluded that in just 16 minutes, from the luxury yacht capsizing, it was resting on the seabed. Pulling down with it Mr. Lynch and 6 others of his group. All that he had managed to gain by his Cambridge doctorate, by his shrewd business dealings, was lost. In that moment, it slipped through his fingers. So tragically, so suddenly. And I and you and we were left asking, did he lose everything? Did he lose his soul? We hope not. Was his focus completely and solely on gaining the world? Was he so consumed and fixated on wealth that he ignored the more important values of eternity, Christ, salvation? We hope not. But are we? Will we? One writer who's not given to exaggeration comments on this 36th verse in Mark chapter 8. Let this saying of our Lord sink deep into our hearts. Words are inadequate to express their importance. The words are, for what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? The main message of our text is, value your soul far more than your silver. It's a verse about proper values in our life. And we'll think about the value to be discarded, the value to be discerned, and the value to be decided. Think first of all about the value to be discarded. In having the right values in our life, the wealth of this world is not to be the priority value. Jesus mentions this value in our verse and uses the term the world. By this he means the wealth of the world, the fame of the world, the pleasures of the world, the power of this world. Think of what gaining the world looks like. J.A. Alexander of Princeton University, a commentator, he put it like this: It's all that the world can offer as an object of attraction or desire. The aggregate sum total of enjoyment, whether sensual, ambitious, intellectual, or pecuniary. Another writer puts it like this: it's hidden gems and resources. Whatever good things grow on the earth, the animals, its livestock, splendor, prestige, pleasures, gaining the world. In the Bank of England vault, there are 400,000 bars of gold worth £200 billion. In the Federal Reserve, there are 507,000 gold bars worth £300 billion. The yearly value of wheat production in the United States alone is $12 billion. The profit of sheep and goats globally yearly is $2 billion. The global art market totals $70 billion. Gaining the world. All the artifacts, all the gold bars, all the profits from the wheat and the cattle trading. And then there's the knighthoods and the palaces to live in and the luxury clothes and the cars and the fine dining, the world of wealth and of power and of fame. And Jesus is holding this up for us to study, to look at, to examine, to drill down into, to explore. There's the world. And he's saying this is a value to be discarded by us. But Jesus here, he's thinking not about people like you and I who dream and long for our Ferrari, if you're that type of person, or a servant, if you're that type of person, a 7-bedroom house, a few acres around your house, to be lady so-and-so, 3 more zeros at the end of your bank balance. He's not thinking about people like us who might dream of those things. But in our statement here, he's thinking about someone who has those things. Someone who has gained the world. Someone who has their yacht moored at Monaco. Someone who has their private jet sitting on the runway at their beck and call. Someone who has their own staff. Someone who has their own chef. Someone who by inheritance or diligent hard work has gained the world. And he's saying that's a value that we're to discard. It's not to be a priority in our life. There's something greater, something more, something richer, more valuable, far more worth having. On the Mississippi River, there was a steamer traveling down there which hit a wreck, unbeknown obviously to the pilot of the boat, and the wreck began to sink. People realized what was happening. There was only lifeboats for a quarter of the number of passengers on this steamer. People started pulling off their outer garments and jumping into the river for safety. But one man, he used those 15 minutes between the steamer hitting the wreck and the wreck sinking to go around the ship and fill his pockets with the wealth, jewels, coins, which the other passengers had left behind. And he amassed in his pockets and on his person more wealth than he would ever earn in a lifetime. And when he came to realize that the ship was going down, he also jumped into the river. And they found his body at the bottom some days later. He had gained, but he had lost something more valuable. And Jesus is wanting us to have this accounting mindset, to think of what's worth more. And gaining the world is a value that we're to discard. We're to discard it because the wealth of this world is temporary, as we were singing in Psalm 49. People sometimes lose their wealth in this life. All will leave that wealth behind after this life. None, the fame, the riches, the properties, the lands cannot be taken with us. That wealth is weakened by its temporary nature. And so the sole aim of our life is not to become a millionaire. The sole bent of our life is not to work night and day to amass wealth, property, land, power. There is something greater, Jesus saying, a value, a wealth, riches that are more lasting, more important. This value also is to be discarded because it keeps us back from something greater. To focus on gaining the world, its wealth and its riches and its popularity is keeping us back from the true riches. We're focusing on a poor second best tier. In the past, I have reasoned with my wife when watching television occasionally, beloved, dear, darling, why watch this 42-inch when we could be watching a 55-inch? We're settling here for something poorer than we could be focusing on. This is Jesus' point here. Gaining the world is a very, very poor second. It's an obstacle to us gaining the real riches. And discarding this value also is advocated by Jesus because of the pain and sleeplessness that gaining the world brings to any of us. The wealthy need their bodyguards. They need their alarms. They're losing massive sleep when the FTSE 100 is plummeting. Here's a value that in Jesus' ethics and mindset and teaching is to be discarded. But secondly, the value that's to be discerned. Jesus talks in this statement about the soul, and he instructs us that what we are to value most in life is the salvation of our soul through the grace and mercy of God. And we're to value our soul because that is invisible and that is eternal. Our soul is invisible. We see our bodies, we wash our bodies, we use our bodies to eat and to work. But the real and most valuable dimension of our being is invisible. Our soul is inside of us. And our soul uses our bodies as a tool. The Greeks had this useful imagery of a rider and a horse. And the rider controlled the horse. So our soul is intertwined with our brain, with our stomachs, with our whole body. But it's controlling every dimension of our being. And so when we think It's not just the 100 billion brain cells that are moving at an incredible rate around our brains. It's our souls using and steering our brain. When we feel joy or sorrow, it's not just this churning in our stomach, but at the very base of our being, there is that emotion. And when we make decisions, they are made from the very heart of who we are. Jesus is wanting us to value the invisible above the visible. What's more important for us is the forgiveness of the guilt of our soul, the salvation of our soul, than what we wear, what we own, what we eat. And secondly, the eternal. Our focus is to be on the soul, because unlike riches, wealth, prestige, our soul lives on. It will not die. It will continue in heaven or in hell beyond this life. Jesus speaks here of the scenario of forfeiting or losing our soul. And losing our soul or forfeiting our soul is to be understood in two ways. One is losing the attributes of our soul, the purpose for which our soul was made. We lose it by corruption, by sin, by godlessness, by unbelief. By turning away from God, we turn to sin and we lose our soul. The attributes, the characteristics of our soul, made for God, made to be like God, are lost. We never achieve, we never arrive at the purpose why God has made us. We think of some people and we talk about some people have been corrupted by their pursuit of power. Power corrupts and so on. We talk about some people who gained wealth in an unrighteous way, that they sold their soul to the devil. They lost their soul. They lost it to greed, to avarice, to injustice, to pride. And Jesus says here, going after gaining the world, making that a priority, holding on to the temporal and the fragile, you will end up destroying yourself. You will lose your soul. But he also uses this in a deeper way, doesn't he? Of losing out on the happiness of our soul at the end of our life. That rather than entering into the rest and joy and glory of heaven, we will be shut out to the horror and darkness and torment of hell. We will lose our soul, not in the sense that it will be annihilated, not in the sense that it will be floating around in limbo somewhere between heaven and earth or in outer space, but we will lose the happiness, the joy of our soul by being shut out from the glory of heaven in the horrors of hell. So Jesus is saying, here is the value to be discerned. That the salvation of our soul by Christ going to the cross and dying for the sins of the world, and by us saying sorry to God and trusting in Jesus, that salvation of our soul through Jesus Christ, that's what we're to value more than anything in this world. Even if we could gain the world, we're to cast it aside, because our soul lasts forever and forever and forever. Have you been reading about the pot discovered in Swatra? A pot which was sitting there in the back garden behind a restaurant, and the local people would come and sup their cappuccino and drink their lemonade, and they would bypass this pot without a second glance. But this pot now is the centerpiece in a museum, because this pot was part of a soup kitchen which catered for those who were starving in the famine of 1845 to 51. Many people never discerned the value, the importance of this discarded pot. But what a pot it was. From it, soup was ladled to feed many. And we all struggle to appreciate this value that Jesus is setting before us here, that he wants us to discern the value of the salvation of our soul. We struggle because our soul is invisible. We interact with the visible, with the tangible, with what we can see, with what we can feel. The gold, the estates, the Lamborghinis, the mansions, the finely tailored clothes, the Gap handbags, the Chanel products, all that's visible, we value, we see the benefit of, and we struggle to give the proper value to our soul that's invisible, intangible. We struggle also because the salvation of our soul from hell to enter heaven is something in the future. We live and struggle to get through each day. Something in the future we put off and say we will resolve this issue at some point in our life. We put it on our to-do list. We write a post-it note and set it on our board. We intend to sort out the salvation of our soul at some point, but because it's a matter that regards the future in many respects, we put it off. We do not place the proper value on the salvation of our soul. And it presses upon us how important this value Jesus is setting before us this evening is. Forget about the riches of the world. This is what you're to focus on, making sure that you're ready to enter into heaven by the work of Christ. And temptation makes it hard for us to focus on the value of our soul. We're surrounded by temptation. The national lottery, the Cool FM cash call on a Friday afternoon, the adverts for electric cars, TVs, iPhones. We can't avoid the temptation that's bombarding us and distracting us all the time. It's hard to get our minds on this. Jesus is sitting here before us. Imagine you could gain the world, set it aside. You discern this, the value, the salvation of your soul. Then lastly, the value to be decided. Jesus uses an accounting term here, doesn't he? This profit. And he wants us to see these items of riches before us, to evaluate them, to understand them aright. See the gaining of the world and what its value is in his eyes. To see the saving of our soul and what its value is in his eyes. Every investor takes their time, don't we? We do our homework. We read around, we consult, we wonder, well, I'm going to put my pension pot in here, I'm going to put my life savings in here. I want to know, is this a good investment? Will the dividend be big? Will the return be sure? Will the stock rise? And Jesus wants us to give this attention to this issue. Where are you going to throw your weight in, your life in, your time in, your focus in? Is it going to be in gaining the world? Or is it going to be into the salvation of your eternal soul? Will you spend your entire life pursuing education, purchasing a big house, driving that luxurious car, amassing a fortune by working all the days and hours that God will give to you? Or will you be a follower of Christ, living for him, and then entering the glory of heaven? See the second word in our verse. What? What? And it brings into focus the grammatical style that Jesus is using here, the grammatical form that he selects here. This is not just a statement of Jesus. This is a question. He's forcing us to decide the value. He wants us to answer it. He wants us to take our time. He wants us to sit down alone in a dark room or a bright room or wherever it is and think of the value of gaining the world. And think of the value of the salvation of your soul. And he wants you to answer the question, what will it profit a man if he gains the world and forfeits his soul? What? He wants the answer. As some commentators say, this is a rhetorical question, and the answer is obvious in Jesus' teaching and understanding. The answer is absolutely nothing. In fact, less than nothing. It's in the red. This will do you damage to gain the world and lose your soul. So they're saying this is a rhetorical question. Well, it might be. But the point is, Jesus wants us to know if his answer is the same as our answer. His answer is absolutely nothing. Is that our answer? He's pressing us. He's forcing it on us. He wants us to speak. He wants us to respond. He wants us to really think about it. He wants us to take a side and commit our life to it. Is it gaining the world? Or is it the salvation of our soul through his work, death, and sacrifice? Lysimachus, born in 360 BC, died in 281 BC, was the successor of Alexander the Great. Now, Lysimachus from Thessalonica, a gifted commander, obviously, he was in this battle and was very thirsty. And in his absolute desperation, he promised his enemies his kingdom if they gave him water. And they gave him water, and he gave the kingdom. And afterwards he said, "Ah, wretched me, who for such a momentary gratification have lost a great kingdom." This is what Jesus doesn't want us to do. To gain the world, but lose our soul. It was madness for Lysimachus, and he could see it afterwards. But Jesus wants us to see it before. He's telling us and setting it out for us. Even if you could gain the world, what a tragedy it would be if you lost your soul. Are we choosing the world over saving our soul? One way that will help us to have this value that Jesus sets out here for us is to memorize this verse. One writer says, these words ought to ring in our ears like a trumpet every morning when we rise from our beds, and every night when we lie down. You ever stood close to a trumpet? You can think of absolutely nothing else when that blast is right there beside you. Your whole mind and attention and being and emotions, everything is focused on this trumpet blasting. But what a thing it would be for all of us every morning and every night. Just for 10 seconds, we focused on this value of Christ and reset our life. Our priority then is to be the salvation of our soul, not the gaining of the world. The choice Jesus sets here is not either or. It's a matter of deep value, deep importance. And as we leave church, we are to consider our values. Our values in education. Are we determined to gain the best degree from the best university? Is that the driving priority of my life? Or do I want to know more the Word and the will of God? Are we going to work all the hours that God in heaven gives us to amass wealth? Is that going to be the driving priority of our day and of our life? Or are we going to deeply value the spiritual riches in Christ? Are we going to pursue promotion and position and power and fame with all our energy and with all our focus? Or are we going to be humble servants of Christ and his people, gaining the world or saving our soul by the Savior, Jesus Christ? Money, money, money. You maybe wonder why that is the title. It's the title of a song by ABBA. And it's an interesting little song about a girl who's working really, really hard, but never has any money after she pays all her bills. And she begins to dream. She thinks, oh, if I could only marry a rich man, then I would have loads of cash. I wouldn't have to work. I could do many things in my life. Money, money, money. She thinks, well, I'll probably never find a rich man that wants me. So she thinks, well, all I'll have to do now then is go to Las Vegas or Monaco, down to the casino there and try and win big time. And if I can win big time, then I'll have plenty money, 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 and be able to enjoy my life. But even if she did marry a rich man, and even if she did win big in the casino, what will it profit us if we gain the world and forfeit our soul?